So the third point of the cell theory is that cells come from other cells. What does that mean? Welcome back to Norris Teaches Science. I'm Mr. Norris. This is another edition of the biology series, and today we are going to talk about the cell cycle background. So by the end of this video, I can describe when and why the cells divide. I can also explain the structure of chromosomes. Very two important goals to have before we can continue on talking in this series. This series is all about cell division. So, why do cells divide? Well, there are three main reasons why cells would divide. First off, to remain small. Cells are already small, but they need to remain as small as possible so that they are more efficient. So they do everything with less energy and it's easier for them to do. If cells get too big, it means that they have to incorporate more energy, they have to use more resources, and it just becomes just hard to do. Another one is to replace worn out or damaged cells. Like, say you get a cut on your arm, it heals up. But those are cells dividing to heal up your skin, um, so that they're replacing the damaged cells. Just like if you get a sunburn, the skin peels because those are cells that no longer are usable. They've been damaged, and so your cells underneath are dividing to replace those cells. And sometimes cells just get worn out. They no longer can work properly and they just get worn out. And also for growth in multicellular organisms. Again, we already talked about this before, but you don't look the same as you did as when you were born. I really hope you don't if you're watching this video. So you have to make more cells so you can grow. All right. So, what is the cell cycle? The cell cycle is a process by which cells grow to its largest possible size, then divides into two identical cells. Two identical cells. Let's see. Two identical cells. Really important that you know that, because the cell cycle makes sure that each cell looks identical because it's going to do the same purpose as whatever cell was the cell before it did. So when we talk about cell cycle, we're going to talk about two terms: the parent cell and the daughter cells. The parent cell is the cell that divides. It's the one in the beginning. The daughter cells are the two cells that result during the division. You can kind of see that happen over here in this GIF. You have one cell, and you get two cells. And it's very generalized in the GIF. We're going to talk more about it in detail as we go further talking about cell division. So which part divides? Well, two parts actually. The nucleus will divide and the cytoplasm will divide. If you remember from our talk with cell organelles, the nucleus is the brain of the cell, the control center. It's where all the DNA is. And the cytoplasm is where it's the jelly filling that all the other organelles are held in. So since there's two parts that divide, there's two parts of the division: the mitosis, which will divide the nucleus, and the cytokinesis, which will divide the cytoplasm. So a little background information. When the nucleus divides, it needs to be able to give each daughter cell identical amounts of DNA. And we talked a little bit about what DNA is. It's a nucleic acid. So before it divides, it has to make sure that it replicates its DNA. And when mitosis begins, DNA has to be in a different form. DNA actually can be in different forms depending on if it's dividing or not dividing. And we're going to talk about that when we get further in this video, which is right now. All right, two ways DNA is organized. You can have chromatin or chromosomes. And it all depends on if it's dividing or if it's not dividing as to what it looks like. Chromatin occurs when the cell is not dividing. Not dividing. If it's not going through mitosis, it is not. It is in chromatin. If it's going through mitosis or meiosis, we'll get into and talk about that at a different point. It would be in the other form. Now, when it's in the chromatin form, it looks long and stringy. You can kind of see a picture right here of chromatin. I mean, that's kind of what it looks like in a real cell. I kind of think of it like you take a whole bunch of yarn and ball it up. That's kind of what I think of when I think of chromatin. Chromosomes occur when the cell is dividing. It's dense and compact. You can kind of see that right here. Now, most people draw a chromosome kind of looks like an X. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about chromosomes. Chromosomes. This picture over here kind of represents what we think a chromosome would look like, or in the science sense. They actually can look a little different. This is what we're going to draw them as. Again, they look like X's. All right. You have something called two chromatids. They're sister chromatids. That's one, and that's one. They're sister chromatids because they have identical genes, or not identical, same genes. And they're held together in the middle with something called a centromere. And the whole structure is called the chromosome structure. And this is what it's going to look like when the cell is dividing. But that's a little bit about the background information. We're going to cover a little bit more about what mitosis and cytokinesis look like. We're even going to get into the other version of cell division called meiosis as I go on with some of these videos. But I really hope that you learned something today. And this is Mr. Norris, and he is signing out.